I'm Matt Vito. I'm a journalism professor of practice at Lehigh, and I'm going to show you how to make deep dish pizza. I know deep dish has its own thing. Out here in the East Coast, you like to call it casserole. You can leave all your silly comments in the comments section below. We're in my kitchen and we get to do this maskless because I have the privilege of being married to the videographer. So, welcome and I hope you enjoy. You're going to need some things: flour, cornmeal, which is kind of the secret ingredient to making a good deep dish crust, which is the most important part of making a solid Chicago style deep dish pizza. Some seasoning is optional. I have been using a little bit more garlic powder recently, adds a nice flavor. Basil and oregano are two others that you might want to use, but that's optional. You are going to need some vegetable oil or canola oil, some olive oil, and a yeast of some kind. I have really begun to like Fleischmann's pizza yeast because I find that it makes the dough nice and easy to work with, but you can use any active dry yeast if you have it. Some water, 1 cup of water, and that's for the crust. After that, you're going to need your toppings, which will be some sauce. The sauce is on the top in a real pizza. And you're gonna have a pound of mozzarella cheese and some pepperoni, sausage, whatever you want, but you're gonna want a lot of it because Chicagoans believe in getting a bite of your topping with every bite that you take. And I like to top mine off with a little bit of Parmesan and Parmesan Romano, whatever you like. Let's go ahead and get started. The recipe that I'm gonna be making will make enough for a 14-inch, 2-inch deep dish pizza. We're gonna start with 2.5 cups of flour. And if you've got 2 pizza pans, I often make 2 pizzas, just double this recipe for 2. And you're gonna need a 1/4 cup of cornmeal. And while we still have our dry ingredients, this is where you're gonna add your seasoning. I go heavier on the oregano than I do the basil, and just basically shake it until I can see the spices as I turn everything, so that you can see a little something in there as you make your turns. So you can kind of see what I mean. I've stirred it around a little bit. I've mixed up the dry ingredients and you can see flecks of the spices in there. That's basically when I know I've got enough spice. Now we're gonna start to add our wet ingredients, and this is where you're going to want to remove any watches or rings that you might have. We're going to use a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, and you're going to need 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Go ahead and dump this in and get started again with your mix. For the yeast, you have a cup of, as my father, who is the inspiration of this recipe, Jim Vito, says, tepid water. And how to define tepid, I suppose it's room temperature, maybe a little bit warmer than that. And it gets the yeast activated. You'll know when you're ready, when you can't see any of those clumps of yeast in the water mixture. Well on the way now for our crust. If you are feeling that your dough might be a little bit too sticky, once you've gotten it nice and mixed, if it's not coming all the way off your hands, and this one I'm finding might be just a little bit on the sticky side, this is where you can start to use some judgment call. Add a little bit of extra flour in there. You don't want it to be too dry either, so you have to be kind of careful, but with practice you'll get the consistency down. If it's too dry, you can add a little bit more oil to it. Okay, we're pretty well mixed through here. And you're gonna wanna sprinkle some flour on your countertop. And just get to kneading a little bit. Basically mixing everything through, bringing the consistency of the dough all the way together. Sorry, this is a deep dish, so there's gonna be no hand tossing or anything like that. We're just gonna put it right back in the bowl. So things don't start sticking, put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of the bowl that you use to mix everything together. plop it in and dress it on the top with a little bit more. So wet a dish towel, make it damp. Place it over the top of your dough, and we're gonna put it in the oven. The oven, of course, should be off at this stage. We're just looking to give it a tiny bit of heat to allow for the yeast to do its trick. So I have learned from my father that really all you need is the light. I'll let mine sit for between 20 and 30 minutes, and then I'll pull it out and start the next part of the process. Not only am I a world-class deep dish pizza maker, I'm also a journalist. So while we wait for our dough to rise, I wanted to give you 3 tips on digesting information and information literacy. First, if you read something and you find yourself angry afterward, ask yourself, is it because you believe it's false and inaccurate, or is it because you simply don't agree with it? Because those are 2 very different things. Make sure that you look at the sources that you are reading about, and if you are feeling like it is false, ask yourself what sources are you using in order to make that judgment call. Number 2, don't go to social media to get a full depiction of the events. There is no nuance in social media. It's just a lot of noise and superlative arguments. Things are going to be the best or things are going to be the worst. And number 3, objectivity in journalism does not mean neutrality. Objectivity is the pursuit of fact and truth if you are practicing good, sound, principled, and ethical reporting. So if we are biased toward anything, we are biased towards the facts and the truth. Okay, it's time to put this thing together. Let's go back to our oven. Get our dough out, and while you're here, we're going to preheat the oven to 450. Before you put your dough in your deep dish pan, let's add a little bit of olive oil so things don't stick. I also find that it adds a nice crispiness to the bottom of the crust. Drop your dough in the middle, and it's a press and a rotate. Press from the center so you're pushing the dough out, because you don't want to find yourself stretching and pulling it to the point where you get holes in the dough. You want there to be crust all the way on the bottom. And as you get to the edges, you start to use the fat part of your hand to push that dough up and along the sides, which gives you the definition of the deep dish. And in deep dish style pizza, the cheese goes first. I like to use a sliced mozzarella. This is 1 pound of mozzarella cheese, and we're gonna use all of it. And once you have your cheese in place, go and grab your topping. If you're using sausage, you would want to brown that before you put this in the pan, obviously. My favorite is pepperoni. We're just about ready. We're gonna add the sauce. Sauce is a big preference. You can make your own if you're crafty, or I rely, if I'm in a pinch, on store-bought sauce. This Mid's pizza sauce has been one of my favorites. There's preference here as well. If you like sauce, use the whole jar. If not, you can get away with a little bit less. But since this is a deep dish, you're probably gonna be using quite a bit. One final option, adding a little bit of Parmesan to the top, just a dusting. Don't go too crazy. And once your oven is all the way preheated, we're gonna put this in. Deep dish is not a short cook time, so keep that in mind. You'll wanna make sure that you start this whole process an hour before you wanna eat or so, because this is gonna cook for almost a half hour. All right, it's time to put this in. Find your top rack in the middle. We're gonna go ahead and set a timer for 20 minutes and check on this. I find it's between 20 and 22 minutes. Okay, I've left this in for 22 minutes. We're gonna take a look and see how it is. What you're gonna wanna look for here is to make sure that your crust has separated from the sides of the pan and it's nice and crisp. This is good to go. And here it is, a beautiful, delicious, deep dish Chicago style pizza. The only thing that I'm allowed to cook in my house because I'm a terrible cook otherwise. Can you smell that? Smells so